Every Langford knew their place at the grand estate, even me, the housekeeper's daughter who belonged in the shadows. For 26 years, I carried their whispers on my back. The maid's kid, they called me, between champagne sips and privileged laughter. Only Grandpa Charles saw me differently, teaching me chess while his real grandchildren collected their birthright. When he died, they barely noticed me at the will reading, their mockery turning venomous when I inherited his forgotten lakeside cabin. They couldn't know that within those weathered walls waited a secret that would transform their sneers into fear, because blood speaks louder than status, and Charles Langford had saved his greatest move for last. I've spent my whole life on the outside looking in. That's the thing about growing up on the periphery of wealth. You see everything, but you're never really seen. My name is Calla Mercer, and I'm 26 years old. My mother, Elena, spent over 30 years as the housekeeper for the Langford family. And I was just there, the extra shadow moving through the halls of their sprawling estate. "Stay out of the way, dear," Mom would whisper, gently tucking a strand of my brown hair behind my ear. "The family has guests today." The family. Never our family. Always the family. As if they were royalty, and we were the loyal subjects who kept their castle running. I remember being 7 years old, hiding in the library because the Langford grandchildren were having a pool party. Elizabeth, the eldest granddaughter, found me curled up with a book. "Why don't you ever swim with us?" she asked, water still dripping from her blonde hair onto the antique carpet. Before I could answer, her cousin Jackson appeared in the doorway. "Because she's the help, dummy," he said with a smirk. "My mom says we shouldn't mix." I pretended to be absorbed in my book until they left, but I heard Elizabeth's response as they walked away. "That's the maid's kid. She's weird anyway." The maid's kid. That's what I became to them. Not Calla. Not even a person with feelings or dreams or thoughts. Just the maid's kid. But not to Grandpa Charles. Charles Langford was different. He noticed me. While his children and grandchildren raced through life accumulating possessions and status, Charles would often find me in quiet corners of the estate and simply talk to me. "Chess is like life, Calla," he told me one rainy afternoon when I was 9. We sat in his study, the chessboard between us, the fireplace crackling. "It's not about how many pieces you take, but about understanding the board." The mahogany chess set he taught me on was carved by hand in Italy. I know because he told me the story of buying it on his honeymoon 50 years earlier. While his own grandchildren were showered with the newest electronics and designer clothes, Grandpa Charles gave me books. Classics, mostly. Dickens, Austen, Steinbeck. "A mind like yours needs feeding," he'd say, eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. I didn't understand then how strange it was, the billionaire patriarch paying special attention to the housekeeper's daughter. But others noticed. Oh, they noticed. "Isn't it nice that Charles is so charitable?" I overheard Mrs. Langford, his daughter-in-law Margaret, say to her friend during a garden party. Her voice dripped with something bitter, taking an interest in the staff's children. As I grew older, the whispers grew louder. By the time I was a teenager, the Langford grandchildren barely bothered hiding their resentment. "Here comes Cinderella," Lila would say whenever I entered a room. Lila was Margaret's daughter. Beautiful, Harvard-educated, and cruel in that casual way that comes from never having to consider other people's feelings. My mother never seemed bothered by any of it. Elena Mercer had a spine of steel wrapped in a housekeeper's uniform. Her hands were always slightly red from cleaning products, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. "We don't need their approval," she'd say when I'd come home crying. "We have each other." I asked about my father once when I was 12. We were folding laundry in our small apartment above the garage, the staff quarters as the Langfords called it. "He's not in the picture, Calla," she said, suddenly very interested in aligning the corners of a bedsheet. "And we're better off that way." "But who is he? What was his name?" She set down the laundry and looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older. Some questions don't have answers that help us love. Sometimes the answer just brings more pain. She never spoke of him again, and I learned not to ask. Whatever secret she carried, it weighed on her. I could see it in the way her shoulders rounded when she thought I wasn't looking. When I graduated college, on a scholarship Grandpa Charles quietly arranged, Mom didn't invite anyone from the Langford family. But Charles came anyway, sitting in the back row, clapping louder than anyone when I walked across the stage. 2 years later, Mom died of cancer. It happened fast, diagnosis to funeral in less than 6 months. Charles paid for everything, from the treatments that didn't work to the simple but elegant service. She was family, he said simply when I tried to thank him. The Langfords sent flowers, but didn't attend the funeral. I stayed on at the estate, not as staff but as Charles's personal assistant. A position he created for me. The rest of the family hated it, of course. Their whispers became pointed comments. "Isn't it time you found your own place?" Richard Langford, Charles's eldest son, asked during a family dinner I was helping to host. Charles had answered before I could. "Calla stays as long as she wants. This conversation is closed." And then, last spring, Charles handed me an envelope. "Don't open this yet," he said, his hand trembling slightly. At 89, his health was failing, though his mind remained sharp. "Open it when you hear I'm gone. And be at the reading of the will, no matter what anyone tells you." I tucked the letter away, unable to imagine a world without Charles Langford in it. That world arrived 3 weeks ago. Heart failure, peaceful, in his sleep. The funeral was grand, of course. Hundreds of people, politicians, celebrities, business leaders, all coming to pay respects to the great Charles Langford. I stood in the back, just another face in the sea of black clothes and manufactured grief. The invitation arrived yesterday. Cream-colored paper, expensive letterhead from Howard Brent and Associates, the family's law firm for generations. Ms. Calla Mercer is requested to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Charles Edward Langford. I've read it a dozen times, wondering why I've been included, wondering if it's some kind of mistake. But then I remember the envelope, still sealed, waiting in my bedside drawer. Tonight, I open it. Charles's handwriting is shaky but clear. "Calla. Be present at the final gathering. The truth waits for the right moment to bloom. With love always, Charles." The Langford estate looms before me now. All stone and ivy and old money. I park my second-hand Honda next to Lila's Mercedes and take a deep breath. Whatever happens today, I know one thing. I'm done being invisible. The moment I step through the front door, the main entrance, not the service door I'd used for years, the atmosphere changes. Conversations stop. Heads turn. Well, says Aiden, one of the cousins. The help usually comes through the back. I ignore him, keeping my chin high as I make my way to the study where the reading will take place. Eyes follow me, judging, questioning. I'm wearing the only black dress I own, simple but elegant. Still, I feel underdressed among their designer morning clothes. Richard Langford looks up from his conversation, his expression hardening when he sees me. "This is family only," he says loud enough for everyone to hear. "I was invited," I reply, holding up the envelope from the law firm. Margaret, his wife, laughs softly. "How resourceful. I suppose emptying chamber pots teaches one to seize opportunities." The room falls silent as Lila approaches, glass of scotch in hand though it's barely noon. Her blonde hair is pulled back in a severe bun, highlighting her sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. Why is she even here? She asks no one in particular. Her mom was just the housekeeper. I feel heat rising to my cheeks, but force my expression to remain neutral. 6 years at the receiving end of Ivy League scorn has taught me how to wear a mask. "Mr. Brent invited me," I say simply. "How touching," Lila replies. Grandpa's little charity case until the end. Before I can respond, Howard Brent enters the study. He's tall, gray-haired, with the precise movements of someone who measures life in billable hours. "If everyone would please be seated," he says, "we can begin." As the family arranges themselves in the leather chairs and sofas, I take a seat near the door, close enough to hear, far enough to make a quick exit if needed. My heart pounds in my chest as I touch the outline of Charles's letter in my pocket. The truth waits for the right moment to bloom. I'm about to find out what he meant. The study smells of leather, old books, and expensive cologne. It's a room designed to intimidate. Dark oak paneling, ceiling-high bookshelves, and a massive desk that Howard Brent now stands behind. Light filters through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the Langford family's expectant faces. Mr. Brent adjusts his glasses and opens a thick leather portfolio. "Before we begin," he says, voice measured and precise, "I'd like to say that I worked with Charles for over 40 years. He was meticulous in his planning and deeply intentional with his decisions. The document I'm about to read represents his final wishes exactly as he wanted them executed." Richard Langford clears his throat impatiently. "We understand, Howard. Let's proceed." I watch the family from my corner seat. For children, 9 grandchildren, various spouses, all wearing expressions that range from solemn to barely concealed anticipation. These are people who have never worried about money and yet worry about it constantly. "Very well," Mr. Brent says. "I, Charles Edward Langford, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The legal language washes over the room. I find myself studying the family's reactions more than listening to the actual words. Margaret's fingers tense and release around her clutch purse. Richard strokes his mustache repeatedly. Lila examines her manicure with forced casualness. Then the distributions begin. "To my son Richard and his wife Margaret, I leave the summer house in Martha's Vineyard and $5 million. Richard nods, as if this is exactly what he expected. "To my daughter Catherine and her husband James, I leave the apartment in Paris and $5 million. Catherine dabs at her eyes with a handkerchief. "To my son William, I leave the property in Aspen and $5 million. William, the youngest of Charles's children, gives a small smile. "To my daughter Elizabeth, I leave my collection of first editions and $5 million. On and on it goes. Properties, heirlooms, stocks, cash allocations, all distributed with careful precision. Each grandchild receives a trust fund. Specific artwork goes to specific people. The family yacht to one grandson. The vintage car collection to another. Through it all, I sit quietly, wondering why I'm here. I expect nothing, hope for nothing, and yet the weight of Charles's letter in my pocket feels significant somehow." Finally, Mr. Brent pauses and takes a sip of water. The major distributions seem complete. The family looks satisfied, if not ecstatic. No surprises so far. "There are a few remaining items," Mr. Brent continues. "To my loyal staff, I leave bonuses as outlined in Appendix C." A slight murmur runs through the room. Standard procedure, but generous apparently. "And to Callum Mercer," Mr. Brent says, his eyes finding mine, "I leave the small lakeside cabin and the contents of this envelope." Silence hangs for a split second before someone, I think it's one of the cousins, snorts. Then quiet laughter ripples through the room. "The cabin?" Richard says with a laugh. "Well, that's fitting. The lakeside cabin. I know it well. It's a simple 2-bedroom structure on the far edge of the Langford property, where Charles used to go to write and think. It's where he taught me chess, where we'd sit on the porch and watch thunderstorms roll across the water. To the Langfords, it's nothing, a neglected property not worth mentioning in polite company. To me, it's filled with the only happy memories I have of this family. "I suppose it needs a good cleaning," says Margaret with a smirk. Uncle William leans back in his chair. "Guess he wanted to leave her cleaning supplies, too." More laughter. I keep my expression blank, though inside, emotions swirl like a storm. Gratitude for the cabin. Confusion about the envelope. And beneath it all, a strange sense of validation. Charles remembered me. He wanted me to have something that mattered to him. Lila turns in her seat, her blue eyes cold as she whispers loudly enough for everyone to hear, "That place is full of rats and rot. Good luck." Mr. Brent tries to continue, raising his voice slightly. "There are several charitable donations outlined on page 12. Did you bring a mop and bucket to claim your prize?" Aiden calls out, causing several family members to chuckle. I stand quietly, gathering my purse. Whatever else Mr. Brent has to say doesn't concern me, and I've endured enough humiliation for one day. Ms. Mercer, Mr. Brent says, holding out a thick manila envelope. This is for you. I take it, feeling the weight of what seems to be more than just papers inside. Thank you, I say simply. As I walk toward the door, Lila calls after me. Don't forget to dust the cobwebs. The laughter follows me down the hallway, but I don't look back. In the grand entrance foyer, I pause to open Charles's letter once more, rereading his words in the light of what just happened. The truth waits for the right moment to bloom. What truth? What was he trying to tell me? Outside, the summer air feels cleansing after the stifling atmosphere of the study. I lean against my car and open the manila envelope Mr. Brent gave me. Inside is a smaller envelope with cabin keys written on it, a document transferring ownership of the lakeside property, and a handwritten note from Charles. Calla. They will laugh. Let them. The cabin holds what you seek. The truth is buried where no one dared to look. With love, Charles. I fold the note carefully and place it back in the envelope. Whatever game the Langfords think they're playing, Charles was playing a different one entirely. Let them laugh, I whisper to myself as I start my car. He never wasted words. The gravel driveway leading to the lakeside cabin hasn't been maintained in years. My car bounces and shudders over the ruts as tall grass scrapes against the undercarriage. Nature has been slowly reclaiming this forgotten corner of the Langford estate. I park beside the cabin and sit for a moment, taking it in. The last time I was here, Charles was still alive. We'd spent an afternoon going through old photographs, him telling stories, me listening, both of us ignoring the oxygen tank he'd recently started using. The cabin looks smaller than I remember. Gray wooden siding weathered by decades of rain and snow. A sagging porch with 2 rocking chairs facing the lake. Windows cloudy with dust. It's nothing like the manicured perfection of the main house, and that's precisely why Charles loved it. No pretense here, he once told me. Just truth. The key sticks in the lock, requiring a firm jiggle before the door swings open with a protesting creak. Dust motes dance in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. The air smells of old wood, abandoned paper, and something like secrets. I step inside, memories washing over me. The stone fireplace where Charles would read aloud on winter evenings. The small kitchen where he taught me to make his favorite grilled cheese sandwich, with 3 kinds of cheese and sliced pear, a combination that horrified my mother. The bookshelf filled with worn paperbacks, poetry collections, and leather journals. The truth is buried where no one dared to look, I murmur, running my fingers along the dusty mantelpiece. What did Charles want me to find? And why all the mystery? I move through the cabin methodically, looking for anything unusual. The kitchen cabinets contain only chipped mugs and mismatched plates. The bedroom holds a simple bed with a faded quilt. The bathroom is predictably Spartan. Back in a main room, I stand in the center, turning slowly. Charles's writing desk sits in the corner by the largest window, overlooking the lake. It's an antique roll-top desk, the surface cluttered with pens, notepads, and an old brass lamp. I remember watching Charles work at this desk, his back straight despite his age, pen moving steadily across paper. While the rest of the Langford family embraced technology, Charles insisted on writing by hand. Pixels disappear, he'd say. Ink indoors. I sit in his chair, running my hands over the worn wooden surface. The desk has numerous small drawers and compartments, most containing what you'd expect, paper clips, stamps, rubber bands. But as I push one drawer closed, I hear a hollow sound from underneath. Kneeling, I examine the bottom of the desk. Nothing obvious, but when I press against different sections, one part gives slightly. A false bottom. I press harder until I hear a click, and a small hidden drawer pops open just enough for me to pull it the rest of the way. Inside lies a single key. Small, brass, old-fashioned. Attached is a yellowed paper tag, reading simply, A36. My heart pounds as I hold the key up to the light. A safety deposit box, most likely. But where? I close my eyes, thinking back through conversations with Charles. He mentioned his bank several times, First National in the city, where the Langfords had done business for generations. A memory surfaces. Charles and me driving back from the cabin 3 years ago. He asked the driver to stop at the bank. Won't take but a minute, Calla. Just need to check on something precious. The bank. It has to be. First National Bank hasn't changed its facade in 50 years. All imposing stone columns and brass fixtures designed to convey stability and tradition. Inside, the marble floors echo with my footsteps as I approach the customer service desk. I believe my grandfather had a safety deposit box here. I tell the young woman behind the counter. I have the key. Name of the box holder? She asks. Charles Langford. Her eyes widen slightly at the name. Everyone in this city knows the Langfords. I'll need to see your ID, please, she says, suddenly more formal. And any documentation showing you have access rights. I hand over my driver's license and the documents from Mr. Brent, the ones transferring ownership of the cabin to me. There's nothing specifically mentioning a safety deposit box, but I hope it's enough. She studies the papers, then makes a phone call, speaking quietly. After a moment, she hangs up and smiles tightly. Mr. Peterson will assist you with the Langford box. Please have a seat. 20 minutes later, I'm following an older man in a tailored suit down a narrow hallway. He unlocks a heavy door leading to a room lined with metal boxes of various sizes. Box A, 36, I say, showing him the key. He locates the box and uses his master key along with mine to remove it from the wall. I'll give you some privacy, he says, placing the metal container on a small table in a private room. Ring the bell when you're finished. Alone with the box, I hesitate. Whatever Charles wanted me to find is inside. Whatever truth he thought important enough to orchestrate this elaborate reveal. I take a deep breath and open the lid. Inside lies a leather-bound journal with the Langford legacy, a confession, written on the cover in Charles's distinctive handwriting. Beside it, a sealed envelope addressed to Howard Brent. My hands tremble as I open the journal. The first page bears a simple inscription. For Calla, who deserves to know. I begin to read. The journal outlines Charles's early years, his difficult childhood during the Depression, his drive to succeed, the building of the Langford Empire. He writes of his marriage, his 4 children, his disappointments and triumphs. Then I reach a section titled Thomas, and my heart nearly stops. My 3rd son, Thomas, was always different from the others. Sensitive, artistic, questioning. While Richard and William followed me into business and Elizabeth married well, Thomas wanted to paint, to explore, to live simply. We argued. Terrible, heated arguments that shook the foundations of our family. I was wrong. So wrong. My pride wouldn't allow me to see that he was simply being true to himself. When he fell in love with Elena, our housekeeper's daughter, I forbade it. Called it inappropriate. Said he was throwing his life away. The things I said to him, to both of them, are my greatest shame. Thomas left. Cut all ties. Said he would make his own way, without the Langford name or money. Elena stayed on his staff. She needed the job, and Margaret insisted we keep her despite the scandal. I think Margaret enjoyed the power it gave her over someone who had reached above her station, as she put it. I didn't know until years later that Elena was pregnant when Thomas left. That my son died in a car accident 3 months after leaving home. That Elena raised their daughter alone, working in my house, watching my family enjoy the wealth and privilege her child should have shared. That child was Calla, my granddaughter, my only true granddaughter. The journal falls from my hands, landing with a thud on the table. The room spins around me as pieces click into place. The special attention Charles paid me. My mother's refusal to speak of my father. The resentment from the Langford family. I'm not the maid's kid. I'm Thomas Langford's daughter. Charles Langford's granddaughter. With shaking hands, I pick up the journal again, forcing myself to continue reading. I discovered the truth when Calla was 7. Elena never told me. I found Thomas's old photos and saw Calla's resemblance. When I confronted Elena, she admitted everything but begged me not to tell Calla. Let her be free of this family's poison, she said. I respected her wishes while she lived, but I've watched Calla suffer the disdain of people who are her blood relatives. I've watched my own family treat her as something less, when in truth, she is the best of us. 3 years ago, I secretly arranged for DNA testing. The results confirmed what I already knew. Calla is my granddaughter. Thomas's daughter. A Langford by blood, if not by name. I've made arrangements. By the time Calla reads this, the first part of my plan will be in motion. The cabin is hers, the place where Thomas was happiest, where he and Elena fell in love. But there is more to come. The enclosed letter contains instructions for Howard. A second reading. A final reckoning. Forgive an old man his theatrics. Some truths demand their moment. I close the journal, mind reeling. The sealed envelope sits before me, addressed to Howard Brent. Charles's instructions to his lawyer. I'm tempted to open it, but something stops me. Charles had a plan. A process. Perhaps I should let it unfold as he intended. I place the journal back in the box, but keep the envelope. As I leave the bank, the afternoon sun feels different on my skin. The world looks different. I am different. In my car, I examine the envelope more closely. Written in small letters in the corner is a date, 10 days from now, and the words second reading. 10 days. 10 days to process what I've learned. 10 days to decide what to do with a truth I never asked for, but have always somehow known. I drive back to the cabin, my cabin now, and sit on the porch as the sun sets over the lake. In the fading light, I open the journal again, hungry for more details about the father I never knew. About Thomas Langford, the artist who loved my mother and died before I was born. In the quiet evening, surrounded by the whispers of water against the shore, I begin to understand why Charles orchestrated this slow revelation. Some truths are too heavy to bear all at once. Some secrets need time to unfold. I touch the sealed envelope in my pocket. 10 days. And then what? Whatever Charles has planned, one thing is certain. Nothing will ever be the same. 6 days after discovering the journal, I'm still processing the truth. I've spent most of my time at the cabin, reading and rereading Charles's words, trying to absorb the reality that I am, by blood, a Langford. The cabin has become my sanctuary. I've cleaned away years of dust, opened windows to let in fresh air, and sorted through drawers and cabinets. In one dresser, I found a box of old photographs, Thomas as a young man, looking so much like me it startled me. Dark hair falling over intense eyes. The same slight curve at the corner of the mouth. My father. The word still feels strange on my tongue. My phone buzzes with a notification. Another article about the Langford family has popped up in my news alerts. I've been monitoring them since the will reading, watching as speculation grows about Charles's estate. Langford inheritance drama. Sources say portion of billions under review. The article quotes an anonymous insider claiming that a significant portion of the Langford holdings are in limbo, with rumors of a second will reading or contested clause. The family has declined to comment. I set my phone down and stare out at the lake. Charles's letter to Howard Brent sits on the table beside me, still sealed. For more days, until whatever comes next, my solitude is interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Someone's coming down the long driveway to the cabin. I step onto the porch just as a sleek black SUV pulls up. Howard Brent steps out, briefcase in hand. He looks out of place in his tailored suit against the rustic backdrop of the cabin. Ms. Mercer, he says with a nod. May I come in? I lead him inside, suddenly self-conscious about the simple furnishings. He doesn't seem to notice as he takes a seat at the small kitchen table. I won't take much of your time, he says. But there are some developments you should be aware of. The news articles, I say, about the estate being under review. He nods. The family is restless. They've been calling my office daily, demanding information about the remaining assets. Remaining assets? I ask. I thought everything was distributed at the reading. Mr. Brent removes his glasses, polishing them carefully before responding. What they received was substantial, but not complete. Charles's business holdings, the majority of his liquid assets, and control of the family trust were not addressed in the initial reading. The magnitude of what he's saying sinks in slowly. How much are we talking about? Approximately 70% of the total estate. I nearly choke. And they know this portion is coming in a second reading? They know something is coming. Not what or to whom. He glances at the sealed envelope on the table. I see you found Charles's instructions. Yes, I say. The journal too. Mr. Brent's expression softens slightly. Charles confided in me about your parentage many years ago. He wanted to acknowledge you publicly, but respected your mother's wishes. Why the theatrics? I ask. Why not just tell everyone in the first reading? Charles believed that some truths need time to land properly, Mr. Brent says. He wanted you to have time to process the information privately before facing the family. And he wanted them to show their true colors before the final revelation. As if on cue, my phone rings. Unknown number. I hesitate, then answer on speaker. Gaia? It's Richard Langford, his voice strained with forced pleasantness. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, I reply, exchanging a look with Mr. Brent. I was thinking we got off on the wrong foot at the reading. The family would like to invite you to dinner tomorrow night. A proper welcome. The insincerity in his voice is almost painful to hear. That's very kind, I say, but I have plans. I insist, Richard says, an edge creeping into his tone. Family should stick together in times like these. Family? I can't help the bitter laugh that escapes. That's not what you called me last week. There's a pause before Richard continues, his voice now honey-sweet. Charles obviously cared for you. That makes you important to us. I'll think about it, I say before ending the call. Mr. Brent raises an eyebrow. It begins, he says simply. After he leaves, I drive to the main house to collect the few belongings I left behind. I'm hoping to slip in and out unnoticed, but as I pack the last of my things in the small staff apartment above the garage, the door swings open. Lila stands in the doorway, a glass of something amber in her hand. Her cheeks are flushed, her eyes bright with controlled fury. Enjoying your little cabin? She asks, taking a sip. I continue packing. It's peaceful. She steps inside uninvited, looking around the sparse room with contempt. You know what I think. She sets her glass down on my dresser with deliberate slowness. I think you manipulated a senile old man. I zip my duffel bag closed. I think you should leave. This isn't over, she says, picking up her glass and hurling it against the wall. It shatters, sending glass and alcohol flying. Some of it splashes my arm. You're not one of us. You never will be. I stand my ground, looking her directly in the eyes. You have no idea who I am. Her laugh is cold. Oh, I know exactly who you are. The maid's kid who doesn't know when to leave. I shoulder my bag and walk past her, careful to avoid the broken glass. As I reach the door, I turn back. Your grandfather knew who I was. Maybe you should ask yourself why that scares you so much. Downstairs, I pass through the kitchen, once my mother's domain, and overhear voices from the study. The door is ajar, and I recognize Richard and his brother William in heated conversation. We can't wait for this second reading nonsense, Richard is saying. The Westlake deal needs to close now. Howard won't release the business holdings until after this mysterious second reading, William replies. His hands are tied by the terms of the will. Then we find a way around it, Richard snaps. That old man ruined everything with his sentimentality. First the cabin to the housekeeper's daughter, now this delay with the real assets. I continue past, their words confirming what Mr. Brent suggested. The family is growing desperate to access the remainder of Charles's fortune. On my way out, I nearly collide with a man stumbling up the front steps. Nathaniel Langford, Richard's son and Lila's cousin. He's clearly drunk, his expensive clothes rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. Well, if it isn't our newest family member, he slurs, blocking my path. Where are you running off to, cousin? Excuse me, I say, trying to step around him. He moves, with surprising quickness, to stay in my way. You got Grandpa's cabin. What else did the old man promise you? Nothing, I reply. Now please move. That old man ruined everything, Nathaniel says, his voice dropping to a bitter whisper. Always with his disappointment, his standards, his secrets. And now this. I don't know what you're talking about, I say, though I suspect I do. He leans in, alcohol heavy on his breath. You don't belong in this picture. Whatever you think you're getting, it won't end well for you. I push past him, hurrying to my car. As I drive away, I see him still standing there, watching me through the rearview mirror. Back at the cabin, I call Mr. Brent and confirm that he still has the second sealed clause from Charles and is waiting for the appointed date. He reassures me that everything is proceeding according to plan, though he sounds tired. The family has been persistent, he admits. But Charles's instructions are legally binding. We proceed as scheduled. That night, I visit my mother's grave for the first time since the will reading. The cemetery is quiet, the late evening air heavy with the scent of fresh-cut grass and distant rain. I sit beside the simple headstone, tracing the engraved letters of her name. Did you keep the secret to protect me, or protect him? I ask aloud. I think about Thomas Langford, the son who defied his father to follow his own path, who loved my mother enough to walk away from fortune and privilege, who died before he could know me. I understand why you didn't tell me. I continue, arranging fresh flowers in the small vase. You wanted me free from their world, but I'm part of it now, whether I want to be or not. The next morning, I'm awoken by frantic knocking. When I open the door, Catherine Langford, Charles's daughter, stands on my porch. She looks different from the perfectly composed woman at the will reading, her hair loose, her eyes red-rimmed. You need to turn on the news, she says without preamble. I invite her in cautiously and switch on the small TV in the corner. The screen fills with a reporter standing outside the Langford corporate headquarters. Allegations of embezzlement against James Wright, who is married to Catherine Langford, daughter of the late Charles Langford. Sources claim Wright has been siphoning funds from the family trust for years. Catherine mutes the TV. It's not true, she says quietly. James was trying to protect those assets from Richard and William. They've been selling off pieces of the company behind everyone's backs. Why are you telling me this? I ask. She looks at me directly. Because you're involved now. Whatever is in that second reading has the whole family terrified. Richard and William have been making deals, leveraging assets that might not even be theirs to control anymore. I don't understand, I say. What does this have to do with me? Father changed in his last years, she says. More reflective. More concerned with legacy than money. He talked about mistakes, about making things right. She hesitates. He talked about you. My pulse quickens. What did he say? Nothing specific. But the way he looked at you. She trails off. My father wasn't a demonstrative man. But when he spoke about you, there was something different in his eyes. Did you know? I ask. About Thomas and my mother? Catherine's expression shifts, surprise followed by a slow dawning understanding. Thomas, she whispers. Of course. You have his eyes. Before she can say more, her phone buzzes. She checks it and stands abruptly. I have to go. James is being questioned. At the door, she pauses. Whatever happens next, remember that not all of us are like Richard and Lila. After she leaves, I call Mr. Brent again. The family is falling apart, I tell him. There are news stories, accusations. I've seen, he interrupts. This is precisely why Charles structured things as he did. The pressure reveals the cracks. Should we move up the second reading? I ask. No, he says firmly. Charles was explicit about the timing. 3 more days, Ms. Mercer. Then everything changes. I spend those 3 days in a strange limbo, watching from afar as the Langford family fractures publicly. James Wright is released without charges, but the damage to the family's reputation is done. Rumors swirl about mismanagement and internal power struggles. Margaret gives a disastrous interview attempting to dismiss the controversy, only to make a disparaging comment about new money that goes viral. William is photographed arguing with Richard outside their corporate headquarters. And through it all, the question of Charles's fortune and who will control it hangs over everything like a storm cloud. On the morning of the 10th day, I dress carefully in a simple blue dress that was my mother's favorite. I touch the small gold necklace Charles gave me for my 21st birthday, a delicate pendant in the shape of a chess piece. The Queen. Mr. Brent picks me up at the cabin. "Are you ready?" he asks as we drive toward the estate. I look out at the passing landscape, the world I've always observed from the periphery, about to become mine in ways I never imagined. "No," I answer honestly. "But I don't think that matters anymore." As we pull up to the Langford estate, I take a deep breath. The truth is no longer buried. It's about to bloom, just as Charles promised. And nothing will ever be the same. The Langford estate looks different to me now. The imposing stone facade, the manicured gardens, the gleaming windows, they no longer intimidate. This house holds no power over me anymore. Mr. Brent and I walk side by side up the front steps. The door opens before we reach it. Stevens, the butler who has served the family for decades, greets us with a formal nod. "They're waiting in the study, sir." "Ms. Mercer." There's something different in the way he says my name, a subtle shift in tone that might be respect. We follow him through the grand foyer, past the portrait gallery where generations of Langfords stare down from gilt frames. I notice for the first time a smaller portrait partly hidden behind a larger one. A young man with dark hair and intense eyes. Thomas. The study is packed. Every adult member of the Langford family is present, along with various lawyers and advisors. Conversations stop as we enter. All eyes turn to us. Richard stands by the fireplace, one hand gripping the mantel. "Howard." "Finally. Let's get this over with." Mr. Brent moves to the desk without acknowledging Richard's impatience. He sets his briefcase down and removes a sealed envelope, identical to the one Charles left me. "Before I begin," he says, his voice steady, "I want to remind everyone that the terms I'm about to read are legally binding. Charles Langford's wishes have been verified, documented, and filed with multiple legal authorities." "Yes, yes," Margaret says, waving a hand dismissively. "We understand the legal mumbo-jumbo. Read it." Mr. Brent looks at me briefly, then breaks the seal on the envelope. The room falls completely silent as he unfolds the document inside. "This addendum to the last will and testament of Charles Edward Langford," he reads, "is to be revealed 10 days following the initial reading, as per my explicit instructions." Richard shifts impatiently. Lila examines her nails with forced casualness. Catherine and James stand slightly apart from the others, their faces unreadable. "If the Langford name means anything to any of you," Mr. Brent continues, "you will honor what follows without challenge or dispute." He pauses, looking up to ensure he has everyone's attention. "Calla Mercer is my granddaughter, the daughter of my son Thomas Langford and Elena Mercer. She inherits 51% of all Langford holdings, effective immediately." Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Then a teacup crashes to the floor. Lila has dropped it, her face drained of color. "What?" Richard finally manages, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Brent continues reading. "DNA testing conducted 3 years ago confirmed what I have known in my heart since Calla was a child. The results of these tests are attached as Appendix A and have been verified by 3 independent laboratories." "This is absurd," Margaret says, finding her voice. "Thomas never had a child." "Elena would have said something." "Elena protected her daughter from this family," Mr. Brent interrupts, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. "At her request, Charles kept this information private during her lifetime." William steps forward, hand outstretched. "Let me see those test results." Mr. Brent passes him a sealed folder. William opens it, scans the contents, and his face goes slack. "It's true," he says quietly. "The markers are unmistakable." Richard snatches the folder from his brother. "This means nothing. A DNA test can be faked. This whole thing is a setup." "The tests were conducted at your own company's medical division, Richard," Mr. Brent says calmly. "Hardly a source you can discredit." The room erupts into chaos, voices shouting over each other, accusations flying, threats being made. Through it all, I remain standing quietly by the door, watching as the family that never accepted me comes to terms with the fact that I am one of them. Mr. Brent raises his voice to be heard over the din. There's more. The room gradually quiets. The following restrictions apply to all Langford holdings. No assets may be sold, transferred, or leveraged without the express written approval of Calla Mercer, who now holds controlling interest in all family businesses, properties, and trusts. Richard's face has turned an alarming shade of red. This is the law, Mr. Brent finishes for him. And before anyone considers challenging this document, be aware that Charles made his mental competence a matter of legal record. 3 separate psychiatric evaluations, conducted quarterly in the year before his death, confirmed his sound mind and judgment. Lila steps forward, her composure regained though her eyes still burn with fury. She manipulated him, she hisses, pointing at me. She wormed her way into his confidence, played the poor little orphan, all to get her hands on our money. Your money? I say, speaking for the first time since entering the room. My voice is steadier than I expected. The money you've been frantically trying to access before this reading? The assets you and your father have been secretly selling off. Lila blanches. How did you? Catherine told me, I say. About the deals, the embezzlement accusations, all of it. You've been tearing each other apart for 10 days, showing exactly who you are. You fraud, she spits. You're nothing. A nobody. The maid's kid playing dress-up. Mr. Brent clears his throat. There's one final item, he says, holding up a small tablet. A video recording Charles made 6 months before his death. He sets the tablet on the desk and presses play. Charles appears on screen, sitting in his favorite chair in the study. He looks tired but clear-eyed, his gaze direct and unflinching. If you're watching this, he begins, then the truth is finally known. Calla Mercer is my granddaughter, the daughter of my son Thomas, who I failed in life but hope to honor in death. He pauses, adjusting his glasses. To my family, I know this comes as a shock, perhaps even a betrayal. But look into her eyes. See what I see. Thomas's spirit, his integrity, his quiet strength. Calla is a Langford in every way that matters. His voice grows stronger. While the rest of you fought over status and possessions, Calla sat with me. Listened to my stories. Asked about my dreams, not my money. She is my greatest pride, and I entrust the Langford legacy to her hands, the only hands I trust to preserve what truly matters. The video ends. The room is completely silent. After a moment, Aiden stands and heads for the door, muttering about lawyers and contests. Several others follow, including Richard, who pauses to give me a look of pure venom before storming out. Nathaniel approaches, suddenly sober and calculating. We can work something out, he says quietly. There's no need for drastic changes. The family businesses run a certain way. The family businesses run on exploitation and tax evasion, I reply, equally quiet. That changes now. He stares at me for a long moment, then turns and leaves without another word. As the room empties, only Catherine remains, standing by the window. She approaches slowly, studying my face. I see it now, she says softly. You have his smile. Thomas always smiled with his eyes first. I don't know what to say, so I simply nod. He was the best of us, she continues. The kindest. Father never forgave himself for driving him away. She hesitates. Will you tell me about your mother? What she was like with you? The question catches me off guard. In all the drama about inheritance and DNA, I hadn't expected simple human curiosity about family. Another time, I say. I think I need some space right now. She nods understanding. Of course. But when you're ready, I'd like to know my brother's daughter. After everyone leaves, I stand alone in the study, looking at the chessboard Charles kept on a small table by the window. It's the same set he taught me to play on all those years ago. I touch the carved queen piece, remembering his voice. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board, Calla. Never sacrifice her without good reason. Checkmate, I whisper, and for a moment, I swear I can hear his gentle laughter in response. 3 weeks after the second reading, I sit in what was once Charles's office at Langford Enterprises. The view of the city skyline is spectacular, but I'm focused on the documents spread across the desk. Mr. Brent, Howard, as he's asked me to call him, sits across from me, patiently explaining the structure of various family holdings. These 3 subsidiaries, he says, pointing to a diagram, have been operating at a loss for years. They exist primarily as tax shelters. I make a note. Close them. The family won't like that, Howard warns. Particularly Richard. His son runs one of them. The family doesn't have controlling interest anymore, I remind him. And we're not in the business of sheltering taxes while underpaying workers. He nods, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Charles would approve. The transition hasn't been easy. As expected, several family members filed legal challenges to the will. All were dismissed when the DNA evidence was presented to the court. Richard and William attempted to call an emergency board meeting to sell off key assets before I could take control, a move Howard blocked with an injunction. The most surprising resistance came from the company executives who had grown comfortable with the old Langford way of doing business: minimal oversight, generous bonuses, and an emphasis on quarterly profits over ethical considerations. I fired the CEO, my first week. The CFO resigned the following day. The board of directors is still adjusting to my presence at the head of the table, a 26-year-old woman they'd never heard of now controlling the empire they've served for decades. My phone buzzes with a text from Jade, the director of the youth program I've established at the lakeside cabin. Kids arriving for weekend retreat. Still need fishing gear. I make a note to have supplies delivered, then return to the financial reports. The cabin, my first inheritance from Charles, has become a retreat for inner-city youth, offering nature experiences, art programs, and mentorship. It feels right somehow to honor both Charles and my father by using the place they loved to create opportunities for kids who might otherwise be overlooked. Howard leaves me with more documents to review, and I spend the afternoon digging through years of corporate decisions, identifying patterns of exploitation and waste that need to be addressed. By evening, my eyes are burning and my head aches with the weight of responsibility I never asked for, but now must carry. I drive to the estate, still strange to think of it as partly mine, and walk through the quiet halls to Charles's study. The family rarely visits anymore. Richard and Margaret have retreated to their summer home. William travels constantly for business that seems largely designed to keep him away from me. Elizabeth has been the most accepting, occasionally calling to check in or offer advice. In the study, I unlock a cabinet Charles showed me once, containing his personal correspondence. Inside are bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, including several addressed to Thomas but never sent. I've been reading them slowly, one each evening, piecing together the story of the father I never knew and the relationship that produced me. Tonight's letter is dated a year after Thomas left. Thomas, I was wrong. Those words are difficult for me to write, but they are true. Your art matters. Your choices matter. My expectations should not have overshadowed your dreams. Elena left us today. No notice, no forwarding address. Stephen says she looked unwell. I fear what this might mean. If you receive this, please know that my door remains open. Not for apologies or explanations, but simply to see your face again. Your father, Charles. The letter was never sent, like all the others. A collection of regrets and missed connections that shaped 3 generations of Langfords. I fold it carefully and return it to its envelope. Then I take out my phone and make a call I've been postponing. Aunt Catherine? It's Calla. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner tomorrow. I'd like to hear more about Thomas. The conversation is brief, but warm. Another small step toward something I'm not sure I can name yet, not reconciliation exactly, but perhaps understanding. The following week brings the first major public test of my new position. The annual Langford Foundation Gala, a high-profile charity event attended by the city's elite, falls to me to host. It's traditionally held at the estate, with the family presenting a unified front of wealth and philanthropy. I decide to break with tradition. Instead of the usual formal dinner with minimal donations and maximum self-congratulation, I transformed the event into an open house at the estate, now designated as the Langford Museum of Art and History. You're turning the family home into a museum? Lila had screeched when the announcement went out. Where are we supposed to live? In any of the 6 other properties you own? I replied calmly. This house belongs to history now. The museum opening gala is a success beyond my expectations. The rooms that once intimidated me with their exclusivity now welcome visitors from all backgrounds. Thomas's paintings, retrieved from storage, where Charles had carefully preserved them, form the centerpiece of the collection. Not all the family attends. Richard and Margaret send regrets. William makes a brief appearance before finding an excuse to leave. But Catherine comes with her husband James, both seemingly relieved by the fresh approach. Elizabeth brings her children, who appear fascinated by the family artifacts now on public display. Nathaniel shows up unexpectedly, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. He finds me by the refreshment table. "You're really going through with this," he says, gesturing vaguely at the transformed space. "The museum?" "Yes." He swirls his sparkling water. "Not alcohol, I notice. I filed a lawsuit against you last week." "I know," I reply. "Howard told me." "It won't succeed," he admits. "The evidence is too strong." I study him, the cousin who once mocked me, now forced to acknowledge our shared blood. "Why are you telling me this?" He shrugs. Honesty seems to be the new family policy. He pauses. "I'm not withdrawing it, just so you know." "I wouldn't expect you to," I say. "But I hope someday you'll understand why Charles made the choices he did." Nathaniel leaves shortly after, but the conversation stays with me. Not quite acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of respect. Later that evening, after most guests have left, I find myself in a quiet corner of what was once the servants' quarters. A small plaque now identifies it as Elena Mercer's residence, 1985 to 2023, as part of the museum's commitment to telling the complete Langford story. I've invited Elena's younger sister, my Aunt Gloria, and her family to the gala. They stand now in the small apartment where my mother lived, examining photographs and personal items I've arranged as a tribute. "She never told us," Gloria says softly, touching a framed picture of my mother holding me as a baby. "We knew she had a daughter, of course, but not who your father was." "She was protecting me," I say, "and probably protecting herself too." Gloria nods. "Elena was always independent, proud. She wouldn't have wanted pity or gossip." She squeezes my hand. "But she would be proud of you now. Standing your ground. Making changes." As the museum staff begin closing up for the night, I walk alone through the grand entrance hall. The portrait of Thomas now hangs prominently among the family gallery. Beside it, I've added photographs of my mother and a small professional portrait of myself that Charles had commissioned for my college graduation. 3 generations of a complicated legacy. A father I never knew. A mother who protected me with silence. A grandfather who sought to make amends through an inheritance I never expected. In my bedroom, one of the few private spaces I've maintained in the estate, I stand before the mirror. Around my neck gleams the chess piece pendant Charles gave me years ago. The Queen. The most powerful piece on the board. "They called me the Maid's kid," I whisper to my reflection. "But he called me his legacy. And now, the world finally knows why." Outside my window, the city lights twinkle in the distance. Tomorrow brings more challenges. Board meetings, legal battles, family tensions that may never fully heal. But tonight, I feel something settling within me. Not peace exactly, but purpose. This legacy, complicated, painful, powerful, is mine now. Not just to possess, but to transform. Just as Charles hoped I would. Just as my father might have done, had he lived to see his daughter grow up. Just as my mother prepared me to do, with her quiet strength and dignity. I touch the pendant once more, then turn away from the mirror. There's work to be done, and at last I know exactly who I am. What would you do if you discovered your entire identity was built on secrets others chose to keep from you? If this story resonated with you, Hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of family secrets, hidden truths, and the power that comes from finally claiming your rightful place in the world.